what did this relationship reveal about me? What patterns did I bring? What wounds did I never heal? And what could I do differently next time? And even when those questions come to mind, many people never seek help. We tell ourselves things like, I don't need therapy. I can figure this out for myself. Or I don't want some stranger in my personal business. And then we carry those same unresolved hurts, the same communication habits, the same fears, and the same expectations. All of that baggage goes with us into the new relationship. And then we wonder why the outcome feels so similar. Tonight's guest chose a different path. Instead of simply moving on, he had the courage to do something different. He decided that he was going to pause and reflect. He examined his own heart, and then he did something that very few people have the courage to do. He wrote it down. His memoir is not an attack on his former wife. It isn't an attempt to settle old scores. It's a collection of letters, honest, vulnerable, and deeply personal, written to the woman who once shared his life. Through those letters, he invites all of us to think differently about love and loss and accountability, forgiveness, healing. So whether you're happily married, divorced, dating, widowed, or simply trying to become a healthier version of yourself, I believe you'll find something in tonight's conversation that speaks to you. And I want you to know that you are among the first to be clued in on this. His book has not officially launched yet. So you're getting a sneak peek at his book before anybody else. So before I tell you his name and bring him on, let me read his bio to you because that alone is impressive. My guest tonight is Oscar Frazier. Oscar L. Frazier is a federal contracting strategist, tech founder, and keynote speaker who has helped secure more than $1.8 billion, that's billion with a B, in government contract awards and trained organizations across 3 continents. He is the founder and CEO of In-Demand Consulting Services and co-founder and CEO of the supplier readiness platform C3PI. And his work has been featured by Forbes, Black Enterprise, NBC, Fox, and CBS. But tonight he is here as an author. In his new confessional memoir, Dear Ex-Wife, Safe, Fast, and Broken, Oscar trades the boardroom for brutal honesty, telling the story of a marriage, a mask, and the long road back to becoming a whole man. Guided by his belief in putting the human back into a dehumanized world, he is opening a conversation many men are afraid to have. So, with that, welcome, Oscar. I am so pleased to have you on the show.
Dr. Linda, thank you so much for having me. It's definitely a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure. I've been waiting for this conversation and I have been excited. It's like a kid in the candy store. It's like, oh yeah, we're going to get into some good conversation tonight.
Oh man, I can't wait. Can't wait.
So let me tell everyone, here are the topics. I said we were going to have 4 different conversations. The first 30 minutes or so, we're going to talk about how the child in you shows up in marriage. And then we'll move into why do men cheat? Now, before you get up in arms, yes, women cheat too. I completely understand that. However, tonight we are talking to a man who openly and honestly admits that he cheated in his marriage. So because he is in the seat tonight, we're talking about why men cheat. If you want to do another show on women cheating, let me know. I'm all for it. The third part of our conversation will be, how do you know when it's time to go? I know for me, many times when I hear about people cheating, it's like, okay, well, if you weren't happy, why didn't you just leave? So we're going to dig into that a little bit. And then last but not least, we'll talk about healing. How do you pick yourself up when the relationship falls down? So are you ready? Oscar, are you ready?
Look, how much time we got again? You said only 2 hours, right? That's all
I
we
know,
got.
right? I
Oh man,
know.
let's go. Let's
All
go. I'm
right.
excited, man. For
All
sure.
right.
Yeah, let's dive in.
Let's dive right in. Okay, so like I said, our first segment has to deal with um, the child in you and how it shows up in relationships. So as I was reading this wonderful book, and I seriously, this book is phenomenal. Go out. We're going to keep giving you ways to find it. It's going to be across the screen and all kinds of things. How to find the book, Dear Ex-Wife. Right now, you can get it off of Amazon.com. But in the book, you talk a lot about your father. And so I want to start out right there. I want you to share with us, what was your relationship with your father like?
Yeah. So my relationship with my father actually was a very powerful one, but it can be confusing to the naked eye, right? In the book, my dad's name is Leon Carter, right? And so, my father, you're talking about a 21-year Navy vet, had a lot of some PTSD, traumas and issues, and he raised us really with an iron fist, right? So his idea of love was never like, I love you, son, let me give you a hug. It was more so like, I'm providing for you, so that's my way of showing you love, right? And so, coming up, it was like watching almost like this. My dad was almost like a superhero. He still is to me now, even though he's passed away. But as a kid and watching him grow up, it was like always wanting to navigate and be just like him. But it seemed like it was so far away to be able to meet like that kind of a responsibility. So it's always been like that throughout the year. I almost felt like even as an adult, before he passed away in 2020, it was like I was always kind of like chasing that superhero to try to catch up to him. And even as an older man, before he passed away, he was 87 years old. My dad was 87 when he passed away. And, you know, to see the man that he was and still want to reach that pinnacle is the way I could best describe my dad. And again, in the book, Leon Carter.
Yeah, and that's important to note that we'll be saying names because since I read the book, I know many of the characters in there, but just so everybody knows, we are not putting anybody on blast, okay? All of the names in the book are fictitious, even Oscar's name. In the book, he's Miles Carter. So we're going to
That's right.
talk about all of these folks, but we'll talk about in a way that protects the innocent as well as the guilty. And so, okay, forgive me because I'm going to be having to go back and forth. We've got messages coming in already. We haven't even gotten started. We have messages coming in already.
Oh Lord, uh-oh.
Yes. So
I'm
we got some.
nervous. I'm nervous. But
Look,
but before we do that, Dr. Linda, I want to just preface this with I do, and I have brought, one of my favorite sippers with one of my cigars. It's an Oban 18 year. And so if it's okay with you, I may go ahead and pour just a little bit in my glass and light a good Opus X, cigar, if that's okay with you. Do I have your
I
permission?
I love that vibe. You go right ahead and light your cigar. In fact, many
Okay.
times when I start the show, I will often invite people to get the right mood. Sit back, relax, get
Yeah.
your favorite chair, your favorite beverage. So you go ahead and do all of that, okay? And I'm going to go to my
Okay.
notes because I don't want to miss a thing. So, okay, so you talked a little bit about your father. And so
Yeah.
would it be fair to say that he was, just kind of repeating some of what you said, he was very strict and his idea of love was not a soft, touchy feely, warm kind of love, correct?
Correct. Yeah, yeah. He
Okay.
was definitely yeah, but he would do anything for you, was a huge protector, which is where I get a lot of my stuff from. But he also was, well, yeah, he was that not the type to say, I love you, give me a hug, son. I don't think my dad hugged me maybe one time, once or twice, but the love he showed me, he was, you couldn't have a better father though.
Okay, so how did that show up in your marriage? Because most of the time what we find is that people either strive to be like the parent or to run away
Yeah,
from it. And that's why we talk about, mommy issues and daddy issues and those kinds of things. So how did
yeah.
that impact you in your relationships?
You know, the the lack of the ability to channel love by way of touch and verbal is what was a challenge for me in a lot of my relationships, right? So I would find myself sometimes, wanting to show love through my actions, but not through actually telling the person that, right? So in my marriage and even in relationships prior to that, I think I sometimes failed at being good at just telling the person, being vocalizing my love and affection for them. And in fact, I think, and it's interesting because in the book, and I don't want to we could go into some of the chapters and stuff, but I know one of the things I talked about was my first time I saw my dad do something that I didn't understand, right? And we were at this pharmacy. I had to have been, I don't know, 8 years old, Dr. Linda. And, I'm sitting there, we're sitting there waiting for him to get his prescriptions. And this lady comes and sits right next to him. And she's like, you're an attractive man, and he's like, thank you, whatever. I don't remember the specific words, but then she says, are you married? And I remember my dad saying, no, I'm not. And me being, I think I was 8 or 9, and I'm looking at my dad like, what the fuck are you talking? Or what the heck are you talking about? Sorry about that. What do you mean you're not? Like, yes, you are. And so that was like that first pivot where I started becoming like, it was like a tilted frame. You see a
Mm.
Superman, but you also see like, why did he say that? I didn't understand like the balancing act in that. And so yeah,
Yeah, the
it's a
flaws.
lot
Kind of
of that
there was
kind of
some there
stuff
was
as
some
well.
holes in Superman's cape. It's like
There was
that.
some holes in Superman's cape. Exactly,
Absolutely,
exactly. Yeah. So all
absolutely.
that kind of trickled into relationships down the line, just the lack of the ability sometimes to just keep it real, to just say how you really feel and embrace and show love as opposed to just showing, well, I'm providing, ain't I? Right? That
Yeah,
should be enough, but that's
yeah.
not enough in an
It's
actual
not.
relationship.
It's
Yeah.
not. And, when you've got a strong man with that kind of approach to love, and then you have a woman who is looking for some of that affection, it can create a lot of conflict in a relationship. And so, while this is not an excuse, part of my understanding behind some of that comes from the fact that we socialize our men around performance. You have to
Yeah.
perform. You don't necessarily have to feel. You don't have to express your feelings. In fact, many times, and you talk about this in the book, many times, even little boys are put down for expressing feelings. Don't act like a
Yeah.
girl. Never let them see you sweat. A little boy falls down and scrapes his knee. It's like, get up. You're not hurt. Those kinds
Yep.
of things. And then we're putting them into sports activities, and we're giving them accolades not for who they are but for what they do. And so they're
That's right.
always trying to measure up. And so I know in the book you talked a lot about this mask that you had to wear, and you talked about your need for attention and your hunger
Yeah.
to be grown. So give us a little bit more on that.
Well, the mask kind of really started when I was really young. So and in the book I talk about my dad and Leon Carter in the book. I kind of had a bit of a balancing act, right? Because my dad had the iron fist, and then my mother, whose name in the book is Denise Carter, she was like the soft hand, right? Who taught me the value of women and how to love and all that kind of stuff. But that confusion and wanting to be chosen, I remember it vividly. I was going to get some blood work done. It was like a regular physical or something like that. And I went into the doctor's office with my dad. I was probably like, I don't know, 8 or 9, something like that. And and my mom's watching. She's probably laughing right now, I promise you. Because what happened when I got in there, I've always been afraid of needles.
Hmm.
And anyone that knows me, really, I got tattoos literally all over my body, damn near. But I always had a fear of needles. So when I was a kid, that was no different, right? And so I'm 8 or 9 years old. I get to the doctor's office. They tell me they're going to have to draw blood. And I immediately start to panic. And my dad gave me that look. He's like, don't you start your you know what in here. So I'm like, oh God, like, please, please, please. So I'm trying. And so the doctors pull my arm out and I recoil. I start fighting back and I'm like, screaming and crying. And I remember my dad was like, stop acting like a girl. And I'm still like scrambling and trying to move around. And he just like slaps me right in the face. And
Wow.
everyone in the room froze. But keep in mind, this was back in like the 80s. So that kind of discipline wasn't like, oh my God, he's being physically abused. It's more
Yeah.
so just like that boy just got his head slapped off his body damn near.
Yeah.
And so that was my first time saying, even if I'm afraid, I have to find ways to mask it. Like I cannot show the fear in that. And my dad, as I grew up, he's always kind of had me that way, right? I mean, I would go places with him in Charleston. We grew up in Charleston, South Carolina. And so we would go places and we'd be selling like lima beans and rice. He had a big like a smoker, and we would go on, I think it was like King Street or Line Street, right in downtown Charleston. And we would go out there and I'd be cold or I'd be tired, etc. And he would always be like, knock that stuff off your face. Like we don't have time for any kind of emotions or none of that stuff. Like that just was not my dad. And so that mask kind of got put on me super, super early. And so now let's fast forward to me being kind of like, I was like the kid that I didn't really come into myself into a long time. So I was like short. I was shorter than most of the kids. I was husky, so I was kind of a little, like a little chubby kid. And I didn't have any facial hair until I was probably like, I don't know, maybe like an 8th or 9th grade, something like that. So the first couple of years of life was always like trying to keep up with everybody else, right? And so the part about being grown, ironically, kind of started happening back in like maybe fifth grade, man. Like there was this
Wow.
girl, and in the book, her name, I think it's Keisha. Let me make sure I'm telling you the right name, because look, even though it just wouldn't matter because it's not a real name anyway.
Yeah.
But for the sake of the book, Keisha Grant was my fifth grade girlfriend, right? And it was innocent, right? We were fifth graders, but the first time we had to try to kiss, I remember trying to practice on my hand, trying to like learn how to kiss and everything. And when we actually did the kiss, it was like, okay, so now I'm becoming a man. I'm in fifth grade. I got my first kiss, and we're there. But it started becoming a trickle down effect. When I got to like sixth grade, I ran into another young lady. I think I was like in sixth or seventh. She was in eighth grade. She was much faster than me, and she kind of like, you know, did like a different kind of kiss. We'll put it like that. You have to read the book to get more details about that. But she gave me a different kind of kiss. And then I had to like lie to my boys and be like, yeah, I've been there before. I've been doing that. So there's probably a lot of guys that can relate to sometimes you're not really prepared for the stuff that you encounter, but you have to fake it. So
Yeah.
that way your other guys can make it feel as if like you're with them, right? So
Yeah,
I
but
was always like the one that was like the late
right back to the
bloomer. It took
whole
me a long time.
that goes back to the
Yeah,
performance thing. Even with your boys, you got to perform, you got to measure up, you got to validate who you are. And at 10
yeah.
years old, validating your manhood, come on. But that's what we do. We got a couple of questions that I'm going to go to. But one of the things, well, I'm pretty transparent. And my poor family, I tell our stories up to a point. So I do want to say that there was a point earlier on in my current marriage, because this is not my first marriage, but there was a point earlier on in my marriage where I remember my husband saying to me that he needed me to see him. And I thought about that again when I was reading the book and talking about, you were talking about the mask and those kinds of things. I think
Yeah.
that sometimes men, particularly Black men, are so busy putting on the mask and remembering all of the performance things and the don't let them see you sweat and all of those kinds of things, that when a woman is looking at you, many times we are looking at your behaviors and we don't always know what's behind the behavior. So as women,
Yeah.
one of the things that we need to be a little bit better about is seeing behind the mask. And then, of course, it would help if brothers could just kind of drop the mask. But we got a couple of
Yeah.
questions I want to make sure we get to. First, let me say that we have some folks that said hello. So hello to Michelle, who's listening in from Georgia. League of Girlfriends, we know who that is. Hello from
Oh
Marietta.
yeah.
Jada Hall, oh my goodness, Jada's family. She's in Virginia. Somebody on the station blog is saying family life must be a house of peace and security. And then we have, again, someone from Pittsburgh, Kevin from Pittsburgh. But let me see, they texted me some questions. So let me
Okay.
find the questions that came in. Unfortunately, our chat is acting up, so I got to do them through
Oh
text.
no,
Okay.
it's all good. All good.
Yeah. So here's a question. How can women help support their husband's mental health? Do you believe you transform into different people in a marriage? And what are ways to stay in touch with your partner to support them and keep the fire in the relationship?
Mm, mm.
Yeah, they not giving
Boy,
you a
that's a
break. They're going
question right
straight
there.
in from the beginning.
And I love it. And I love it. So here's a short answer. That from and again, I'm not a licensed psychologist or therapist or anything like that, but I can give you my experience. I have had my ordeal with relationships, and I became at least three different people in when I was married. Right? You have like the initial, you know, uh, honeymoon phase, if you will. You're one person. Then you start to kind of get into a bit of a rhythm of life. You kind of become another person. And then I don't know how many people on this are listening that are above the age of 40. But once you hit 40, your mind starts to just come into its own and you become another more refined man. Now, again, I can't speak for women on that, but I can speak for men and say that that's what usually happens. You're going to get a little bit of refinement. And so during those times, how do you, like how you're saying, how can a woman be able to, like, I guess, empower her man to be himself and keep the fire going? That's really more of like the man's responsibility as well, because as he changes, if that man is not willing to be honest with you and tell you that he is changing and that his needs have either, ascended or descended or transcended, if he's not telling you those things, that's problematic. I
Yeah.
can tell you that right now, right? But you also have to create that safe space for him to be able to talk to you about things like that, right? And I think, Dr. Linda, sometimes what I've seen and what I've experienced is we get into like that overall kind of like, in the vibe, we're just moving along life. And sometimes we forget to like check, your passenger seat, your back seat, your rear views. You're just moving.
Yeah.
And one of my buddies taught me this a long time ago. And I wish I had listened to him when he first told it to me. But I was much younger. I wasn't the person I am now. I'm almost 45. So my thought process is a lot different than when I was 35, right? So what he said to me was this: as a man, and you're driving in the driver's seat of your car, right? And think of it as like the family's in the car with you. Think of that as life. The car is synonymous with life. Sometimes what we do is we start driving and we've never taken the time to look to the right of the person who's sitting in the passenger seat with you to say, do you know where we're headed? Do you even want to go in that direction?
Mm.
And then you start making lefts and rights and different turns. And the person sitting next to you starts to kind of become like, he hasn't asked me one time, do I even want to be in the car with him? Right.
Good
And so
point.
when you
Yeah.
start to put that into a household, that's what it takes to really be successful, is an ability to really communicate. One, here's the direction I'm headed in. Do you want to go in that direction? Right. And if she does not, that needs to be a conversation. It doesn't mean you got to break up, none of that stuff,
Right.
but it does mean a conversation and understanding, well, why is it that you don't want to go this way? Maybe she's got another dream. Maybe she's got another
Absolutely.
idea. But if you're just driving along with the blinders on, that's what typically happens. And you look back, 15 years have gone by, or for those who have been married that long, 3 years goes by, 5 years, 10 years. And before you know it, you look to your right and you don't even recognize the person anymore. And it's like, what do I do now? Right. So
Yeah.
that's a long-winded answer.
No, that's
But
good. That's good. And
yeah,
actually, there are
yeah, I
two
hope that
things
makes
I want to
sense.
pull out of that before we go, because it's about time for a break. Time goes fast. About time for our first break. But before we do that, two things I want to pull out of that. One is, hopefully, so one of them has to do, sticking with your analogy about the car. You have to also keep in mind that sometimes the person in that passenger seat will offer a direction to you, and the
Mm,
person who's behind the wheel is reluctant to take it. The
that's
person
right.
behind the wheel is like, I know what I'm doing. I know where I'm going. So
That's
I
right.
know, often being in that passenger seat, you have the inclination to not ask questions, to not speak up and say, hey, where are we going? I'm not trying to go in that direction, because you just don't want the fight that may come
Yeah.
along. So it's a
Yeah.
it's a give and take. Yes, he needs to ask and not just assume or drive her somewhere where she may not want to go in life. We're still with that life analogy, but by the same
That's
token,
right.
if she speaks up to sort of course correct, then he needs to
Yep.
be willing to accept that. The other thing I wanted to say
Absolutely.
is, you were talking about from an age perspective. When a woman who is in that age bracket, she is starting to go through perimenopause and menopause. Her hormones
Mm,
are all over the place. We don't even know what's going on in our bodies. So we know you don't know what's going on in our
yeah.
bodies. But you're talking about things changing. Things change
Yeah.
with us. And so that's one of the reasons where communication is really key, because while he's sharing with her, she needs to be sharing with him, even if she doesn't have the language for it to know that it's perimenopause or menopause. At least they've got to learn to communicate and be patient with one another, because
Yeah.
she's changing, her mind is changing, her attitudes are changing, her body is betraying her. There are all kinds
Yeah.
of things that are going on. So yeah, this is
Absolutely.
good stuff. This is good stuff.
Yeah.
And so hang with us,
Absolutely.
family. You're listening to Relationship Conversations with Dr. Linda Bing on Pittsburgh's DSEN. My guest is Oscar Frazier. He's talking about his fantastic new book called Dear Ex-Wife. It's time for our first break, but don't go away, because the conversation continues in just a minute. We'll be right back.
Yes, each Saturday. And all the jams that make you move and dance. Yes, check it out. Pittsburgh, it's an old school party. Yes, each Saturday we throw it back with some of the best old school music, funk, R&B, old school, rap, hip hop, and all the jams that make you move and dance. Yes, check it out. Each Saturday, right here on Pittsburgh's DSEN. All the old school jams, 6 to 11 p.m.
Pittsburgh, have you seen our Sunday radio schedule? Ooh, it is lit. Start the day off with our Sunday gospel music from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. It will inspire you and have you praising the Lord. Then from 3 to 8 p.m., we bring you Sunday jazz melody for all the jazz lovers. Then cap off the night with the Quiet Storm from 8 to 11 p.m. to hear the best smooth, romantic, and soulful R&B sounds of yesterday and today. All that each Sunday on Pittsburgh's DSEN, the place for soul.
Welcome back. I'm Dr. Linda Bing. This is Relationship Conversations, and you are joining us as we're speaking with Oscar Frazier. Oscar is the author of Dear Ex-Wife. What we're talking about this evening has a lot to do with relationships and some of the challenges that we face in those relationships. So if you have a question or a comment, you can call us at 412-213-8995 or text 412-218-3888. And of course, if you're listening to us on YouTube, put it in the chat and someone will let me know that the message is in there. So we were talking about how the child shows up in a marriage. And we covered a lot of different things there, including the mask that people put on and where that mask comes from, communication, all of that. One of the things that came to mind for me had to do with your father and the fact that you talk about how he cheated. Before you comment on how that may have impacted you in your marriage, again, we drop a little bit of knowledge on us. Research tells us that 20% to 25% of married couples experience some form of physical infidelity in their marriage relationship. Approximately 20% of married men and 13% of married women report having had sex with someone else during their marriage. And when emotional infidelity kicks in, like, sexting or those intimate conversations online, when you include that, the numbers climb. So for men, it goes from 20% of married men to now 45% of married men, and from 13% of married women to 35% of married women. So there's a lot of this behavior going on. And I think many times what people think is starting out innocently is not as innocent as we think it is. So if you are speaking to someone that you would not be speaking to if your spouse was in the room, then you know that that's a form of emotional infidelity. If your tone of voice would be different if your spouse was in the room, if the things you're talking about would be different, all of that is just, you're on that slippery slope. And so the rates jump to 60 to 70% when you're dating or in a non-marital committed kind of relationship. And these stats rely heavily on self-reported information. So, if 60 to 70% of the people are fessing up to this, they're probably even more than that who are not coming clean on that. So we need to, I just want to make sure that we keep it in context, understanding the magnitude of cheating in relationships. Now, in the book, you talk about the fact that your dad cheated and you gave some examples of, different scenarios with him. Even the point of sitting in the pharmacy waiting for his prescription, telling that other woman that he was not married is
Yeah.
a form of emotional infidelity. So I'm curious, do you think that the fact that he cheated had an impact on you cheating in your marriage? You know, was it sort of like, did you become desensitized to it? Was it like, okay, I've got the green light. If dad did it, I can do it. How did that impact you?
Well, let me kind of quantify that, because I'm sorry, qualify it. So there's a bit of both of it. I think what it did was, because it wasn't like I saw him outright, but here's one of the stories. It's actually in one of the first couple of chapters of the book, where I was getting ready for school in the morning, and a phone call came in. To back then, it wasn't no cell phones. It was like a house phone, right? And so there was a phone we had inside the kitchen that was this is when we already moved to the main house we grew up in on Pinehurst Avenue. And this lady called, and I remember I answered the phone, but I didn't say hello. I just kind of picked the phone up. And it was either, I think, my mom, my dad, they were on the phone. This lady got on there, and she's just like saying all these really explicit things about how, I think she said she was pregnant and all this kind of stuff. It was a whole thing. And right then, it kind of shocked me, because I'm like, I didn't understand it, right? I was so young, I didn't understand why would she say that? Is this true? All those kind of questions. So fast forwarding from that, I wouldn't say that necessarily normalized it, but it did make it to a point where I could say, maybe this is something that is not necessarily like this huge, issue. Now, keep in mind, I was very young back then. And over the years, coming in through high school, once I got to about ninth grade, things really started going crazy when it came to women, right? As far as like mistakes and sex. And so it was very confusing. And even in the book, when I started talking about the first young lady that I found out when she was pregnant, her name was, in the book, is Brianna, right? And this is when, you know, my life started to kind of shift upside down, and just understanding, like, I had just got out of another relationship with another young lady right before her. Her name was Monique in the book. And so not understanding kind of how to really transition between relationships. And then pretty soon I found myself, when I was dating Brianna, and again, Brianna, it was like I started then to start dating another young lady, and I didn't see anything wrong with it because all of my other boys were doing it. It was like it was normal to have more than one, female. So I think that that's what started to trickle down. And I never really grew up from that time. Because again, remember, I had a mask on for the majority of my life, Dr. Linda, right? So I'm going off of being the guy that's always, buying the bottles, doing the partying, in the mix. And then it's like that kind of also came with the side of like, who's Oscar got next, right? What's the next thing that he's doing that we're all can say the oohs and the eyes about? So I think that it's a bit of like, yeah, I did get exposed to it really young, but I also learned it more as I transitioned from, high school into college. College is when it really kind of got a little bit out of hand, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But yeah, but for sure.
Yeah, they're definitely, when you pick up the book and read it, there's a lot of ladies' names that go on in that book, a lot of ladies' names. So one thing that I want to speak about before we get into the real meat of cheating is
Yeah.
I remember, so back in the day, I was on an FM station on Love and Relationships, and
Mhm.
Michael Baisden, before he became big, was a guest on our show. And
Okay.
Baisden used to talk about cheating and the reasons why men cheated. And he talked about the fact that it wasn't the woman. He was like, whatever they tell
Yeah.
you, it's not you, it's about him. I
Hmm.
remember in my first marriage, I discovered that my husband was cheating. And
Yeah.
I called one of my brothers. I was so hysterical on the phone. He was like, "What's the matter? Where are you? Are you hurt?" And when I could finally get the words out, the first thing my brother said to me is, "This is not your fault." He said, "I don't know what happened. I don't care what happened, but it's not
Yeah.
anything that you did. It's not anything you
Yeah.
didn't do. It's not about
That's
who
right.
you are or how you look." So I want you to touch on that, because I just gave us the numbers for how pervasive cheating is. And whether you're the male or the female in the relationship, when you're in a relationship and somebody cheats on you, one of the first places where your mind goes is to yourself. Why? Was I not enough in whatever area it was? So, yes, I acknowledge, as I said at the top of the show, women do cheat. but tonight we're talking about why men cheat. So help us understand what was going on inside of you that led you to some of the cheating behaviors.
I mean, if I'm keeping it a whole buck, like it was part of like it was almost like part of the program at that point. And we're not talking about this is not even this is pre-marriage. So in
Okay.
order for me to talk about what happened in the marriage, I needed to talk to you about how I got there, right?
Okay.
So Renee Lawson, another name in the book, that's not the real name, but was one of my first real kind of girlfriends in college, right? And she was older than me and everything. And I ran into another young lady during that time that was just like a different kind of person, right? And it was like the guys, like the overall pressure of trying to be chosen, which you hear that I talk about that a lot in the book, where for my first kiss on a chain link fence, from fifth grade all the way through, me writing the last letter to my ex-wife in the book, I was always trying to be chosen, right? So from Renee moving into when I got to a serious relationship, I had my first real heartbreak, like first real one. Lady named Janelle, again from the book. That was the person that I had really thought I was going to marry, right? I was like, this is it. This person is it. I don't need nothing else. And at that time, I'd already tried to get engaged to Renee when I was in college, because realistically at that time, you remember, like, and you might can relate to this, I don't know if you can or not, but some of the guys that listen to this, when you've been a girlfriend and boyfriend for a period of time when you're younger, and then it's like, what's the next title that happens next? And we've all probably had friends, cousins, nephews, uncles, whoever, that say like they've got their fiance, and they've been the fiance for 5 years, right?
Yeah.
And it's like when I was in college, it was like that's what I did. I was nervous. I was like, I don't know what to do next. She wants more. She's older than me, so I popped the question, got engaged. We quickly got unengaged once I started, kind of running out there and doing a lot more than I should have been doing in college. Fast forwarding to Janelle. Janelle was the first person that cheated on me,
Mm.
right? And when she did, it literally ripped me apart. We had just moved from we were living in the Virginia Beach, Norfolk area for a couple years, and then I got promoted up and went over and moved into DC. I was working for a lot of big companies, making a lot of money, but we were in over our heads. We were living way above our means, and her pattern started shifting, right? She was coming home late, she was staying out late, coming home drunk. And I'm just kind of, what is this about? And I don't know, Dr. Linda, when you saw the chapter where I talk about me checking the phone bill. I never used to check the phone bill, never ever checked the phone bill in my life. But I happened to do it that day, and I saw the same number popping up, over and over, and at 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning. And I'm like, well, I know it's not me because we're in the same house during that time. And so I call the number, a guy answers the phone. So I panic. And they were already in cahoots. Like, sometimes they say a lady is like a few more steps ahead when it comes to stuff like that than the guy is. We go out there, fumble around with our belt buckle, mess up, and then we're trying to like figure it out afterwards. Whereas a lady may have already thought about this 2 months in advance, so it's a different thing. And so nonetheless, she broke my heart, man. That's the best way to put it. I went into a lot of deep depression, during that time. She left the house for 2 weeks straight. I didn't know what was going on. So these are the things that kind of started to, I guess, jade me. And then now let's move forward into immediately after that part happened, the heartbreak. I went to CIAA. I don't know if you've heard of CIAA, Dr. Linda, or not, but we used to go to
What's
that
that?
all the time.
What
I
is
went to an
that so that
HBCU.
everybody understands? What's CIAA?
So the CIAA is one of the collegiate regions of where HBCUs have teams, right? So I went to an HBCU that's in Charlotte, North Carolina, right? And most of the other HBCUs that we played football against, basketball against, etc., were also CIAA schools. You have like the MEAC, you have the SEAC, you have the CIAA, etc. Well, every year the CIAA used to put on a huge, it was really a tournament with the basketball teams, but it really was for most of us that didn't play ball. It was like a week-long party. You go out there, you're partying, you're going to clubs, etc. Well, I went to CIAA right after the heartbreak, and I ran into an old friend that was always just like more of just like one of the homies. We were just kind of talking college. She wasn't really anyone that I would say would be like someone I would really look at like that. But I was so distraught and trying to hide it. Again, the mask again. When I got there, it was her and one of her roommates, and we kind of all got together, and kind of lo and behold, Hannah, that's in the book, ended up becoming my wife some years later. But it started from me really being torn apart from heartbreak, and then I don't know how to adjust to that, and then I get to Charlotte, and then I meet Hannah, or we reconnect, and before you know it, we're dating, and things start to go really, really fast, way too fast, and I wasn't ready. So the cheating didn't even start from anything that she did. And you'll read that in the book. I mean, literally, the first few years, I was on the right track. I was doing the right things, stuff like that. And then there was this cigar convention that happened in Miami. And during that time, I got some folks that may or may not, you'll read in the book, we had a lot of different businesses at this time. Hannah and I, we were moving and doing a lot of different stuff. And at this point, we had a restaurant. And so we were under a lot of stress during that time. And so when I went to Miami with all my boys, we went out there, I met this one young lady that kind of like turned my life upside down, right? Because it was like I had no business really kind of like doing what I did. And her name in the book is Talia, right? And Talia was the first one that I really crossed the line. And I felt so guilty at first, but the high fives and the guys saying, "Oh man, you got her," and it's like that went to my head then, and it really just started to spiral a lot after that, right? So, like the actual cheating itself was, I think, that was never the catalyst. It was a symptom to what I was really facing, which was really just trying to be chosen. And in the marriage, after about year 5, it was like things started to just like go downhill really fast, right? It was like the way how we engaged with each other. We had these different businesses. So it made it very hard to really still find the intimacy in the relationship. And looking back at it at 45 or 44-year-old Oscar now, I know it's because I didn't really give the effort. I started giving up. And I was just kind of like, well, if she's not going to do it, I've got, Talia, and then later on in the book, you'll hear other people, Jade, and some other folks that I was running around doing stupid stuff with, but it was like, that was my outlet. And it wasn't the right thing. And I make that very clear throughout the entire book, I'm never high-fiving myself. The reality of it is.
Before you go there, because I don't want us to get into where I'm going in the next segment. So before you go there, let me just ask you this. So yes, in the book, you named your wife in the book, Hannah. You told us how you met Hannah. Give me 3 to 5 things that attracted you to Hannah. What attracted you to Hannah?
The very first thing was she was safe. She was very safe. Because my dad he was an old school guy. He was born in 1933, and so his idea of like a marriage and what I saw was very different from what I was starting to become initially, right? When I was first with the lady who broke my heart. And then when I saw Hannah, it was kind of like, and this is gonna come across wrong initially, but hear me all the way. Okay. All right. So a lot of times men spend their life chasing Lamborghinis and Ferraris, right? But as you get older, you recognize that those are things that are nice to test drive, maybe take out for a weekend, this, that, and the other, but you don't necessarily, we're trained sometimes to think that you don't necessarily, buy the Lamborghini or the Ferrari, right?
Okay, wait, stop right there before you go further, because I want to make sure that women hear that. There are so many women, especially young women in like late 20s, early to mid 30s, who are trying so hard to come across as the Ferrari or the Lamborghini. And oftentimes, yes, he will run around and drive that Ferrari, but when it's time to settle down, he's looking for a sedan or a coupe. And you even said that. You said that she was safe, and that was one of the things that attracted. So I hope that sinks in for people. That the women who dress a certain way, come across with the boldness and lots of things. Even in the book, you talked about it. There were some women. Try to remember. I think was there a Roxy or somebody in the book, Lauren and Roxy. Yeah, they definitely fit into those kind of categories with the ways that they
Yeah.
behave. Not all attention is good attention. So yeah, he might be looking
Bingo.
at you because you're a Ferrari or a Lamborghini, but when it's time to settle down, he ain't looking for you. He ain't looking for a
Yeah.
sedan or a coupe. So okay, so
Yeah.
one thing was she was safe. Give me something else. What else attracted
Yeah.
you to her?
She was safe, and of course, I mean, she was a beautiful lady. She was, but when I look at what I had prior to that to her, it was polar opposites, right? She was safe. I had a terrible heartbreak from someone. A lot of my guys would always say, "Oh, this me along type," look. And then I got with her, it was like gorgeous, but just a polar opposite.
Yeah.
And so that safety, so she was safe. It was like she definitely heard me. I think she actually could see me because she knew me for a very long time. So I kind of felt like it was like a safety net for me, And so
Mm-hmm.
as we got deeper into the relationship, I think that's what made us grow into love so fast, because it was like she was my friend. You know what I'm saying? She was a friend of mine. But as far as our sexual chemistry, I think it was there, but I think it had to initially it was obviously was fire, right? It was all fiery at that in the beginning, right? But as we said earlier, you kind of go through those phases. And so
Mm-hmm.
once that fiery side goes down, you look at this person and it's like, okay, so now I have a safe and reliable individual. But is that what I'm going to want long term? And I think
Right.
that was the mistake. And I'm sure we'll talk about in the next segment, but that's really what happens to a lot of men. You go the safe route, and then you mistake that down the line, because now you want to go looking at those Ferraris and the Lamborghinis
Yeah,
again,
you still
and
want to drive fast. That desire to
you still want to
drive
drive
fast hasn't
fast.
gone away. Yeah.
Bingo,
Yeah.
bingo. And so that was like part of that challenge. But again, Hannah was 100% a very safe person, very easy to talk to, attractive. So those would be like the three things that I would say
Okay.
would have been what I could say would really kind of attracted me to her for us to go further than what we and then actually becoming married eventually, right?
And so was she the first like relationship after Janelle broke your heart?
Hmm.
Okay.
Well,
The
well, I got it. Here's what I'm gonna say.
okay.
Yes, with one small caveat.
Okay.
Okay, and that small caveat, I think and people are going to see it inside of the book. When I was heartbroken and really, really confused after having my heart broken, um, Kendra Shaw was one of Janelle's best friends, and she was like that confidant during that time. When you and I both know that's a bad, bad, bad combination.
Yeah.
And so she came with the visit, and her and I had some fiascos, some things happening, but we never dated. But she wanted to date. She wanted to actually be in a real committed relationship. But I just knew that wasn't going to be a good thing. So that never really kind of came to fruition.
Yeah.
And right before Hannah and I became like an official couple, her roommate and I talked for a little while, but it was very, very weird. It was really more like kind of platonic. It was kind of weird. But so to answer that, I want to make sure you had that little piece, because that's definitely inside of the book. And we
Mm-hmm.
talk about those little kind of transgressions. But the first real girlfriend was definitely Hannah after my heartbreak.
And the reason I asked that question is because many times that rebound person is not the person that you're going to be with long term.
Yeah,
The
that's right.
rebound person is somebody that makes you feel good. There's somebody that
Yep.
meets you where you are, but where you
Mm-hmm.
are right after that heartbreak is not where you're going to be once you're healed. So you could
Mm-hmm.
almost, not everybody, but again, psychology is I got a bachelor's, two masters, a PhD, and a string of certifications, one of which is as a relationship specialist. So to somebody
Yeah.
like me looking at that, we automatically know from the beginning that's not going to last, because who he is now in this raw hurt stage is not who he's going to be 3 to 5 years down the road. And that rebound person, you never want to be the rebound person, because it
Yeah.
almost always won't last. Now, I will say that it can work if there's enough time and healing that takes
Yeah.
place. But it doesn't sound like that happened with you. There was Kendra, and then there was the roommate and that kind of thing. So, of course,
That's
if
right.
you want to get in on this conversation, the number to call is 412-213-8995. Or if you don't want your voice on the air, text me 412-218-3888. Got to say hello to a couple of people because they're saying hello to us. So we've got, come on up. All right. Hey, Takita. We've got Takita from Virginia, Wanda from
What's up?
Kennesaw.
Okay.
I think this is Lainey. You know how sometimes when the string, so forgive me if it's not, but Lainey from Charlotte. And
Okay.
then wait, we got some more. Came in another message. Oh, somebody, I guess when we were talking about the Ferraris and the sedans and somebody put in a minivan. And so yeah, I think sometimes that happens too. It depends on what your life experience is. I think many times what men in particular, what they might go for after the heartbreak.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
looking at that Ferrari, you know, you want that sports car, but when it comes time to settle down, what you actually want to settle down with is the minivan, the sedan, the coupe, something along those lines.
That's right.
So, okay, so we
Absolutely.
know what changed. It wasn't that Hannah changed, it was that you changed. You were going through the process of becoming. And so I'm going to, well, before I go there, in the book, you mentioned Ava. We'll get to Ava later, but you made a statement about how, and I'm paraphrasing, of course, but you talked about how Ava wasn't the problem, she was the catalyst. And I think that is so important because many times in situations, again, going back to what Baisden and my brother would have said about why men cheat, it's not
Yeah.
anything about that particular woman. And it's not even about the woman that they cheat with. You know,
Yeah.
sometimes women will feel like, well, if I were prettier, if I were thinner, it's
Yeah.
not about that. It's all what's going on inside his head. And a lot of it is pride. You know, a lot of it,
Sure.
again, comes from, we talked in the beginning about how men are socialized to perform in so many different ways, and you've got to measure
That's right.
up. So you always have to have that image, that facade, and you don't want to see it fall down. So once your boys started giving you all kinds of accolades for the different women that you were pulling, you had to keep
Yeah.
that image up, and your pride
Bingo.
kicked in. So I want to
Yeah.
ask you this before we break, because again, time goes fast, and we're about at that time. Um,
Woo.
since you
Oh, that's
cheated,
fast.
yeah, you
Uh,
cheated prior to and you cheated in the marriage. You have been very upfront throughout the book and throughout this conversation. What do you think about this statement? Once a cheater, always a cheater.
yeah. That's it's a it's not a fair statement, and I'm gonna
Okay.
tell you why. I think that no one is beyond redemption, but I also think more importantly, the only way that's going to happen, because it does become a trained thing, you get kind of used to it. But if you really take the time to look inward, right, and towards the end of the book, we talk when I finally sat down and like really like saw myself, my own inadequacies. That's when I realized I didn't need to cheat anymore. I didn't need to have multiple women or and all that kind of stuff. But that I don't agree with that statement as a direct answer to that. And I think that the caveat to it is if the man is willing to really introspectively look at himself and realize that it wasn't all the other people, it wasn't all the other one of your boys saying, "Oh, you the man," or the girls who would give you easy play and that kind of stuff. It wasn't any of that. It was actually you. And when you step back and you look back maybe childhood and on up and work your way until you find out where was that gap when you really started having to try to feel needed and wanted. And that's when you start to really get into the healing process so you don't have to continuously cheat for the rest of your life.
I agree 100%. I agree. If you're willing to do the work, I agree 100%. Because again, it goes back to there's a void in that man. He may not recognize it as such. He doesn't know that it
Sure.
exists, but there's a void. And he tries all these different ways, including different women, to fill it. And it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And when you finally
Sure.
realize that all of this stuff is just noise, it's not addressing the real problem. Once you
Yeah.
tackle the real problem, then the need to cheat goes away. So I
Yeah.
appreciate that. Let's see, we got a couple of comments here. Somebody telling me you are a big deal. Thank you. I appreciate that, Sabrina. And we got some other stuff. Okay, we've got a call coming in. The caller is connecting. Headsreal, is the caller on the line?
I'm here.
Okay. Thank you so much for calling in. What's your question or comment?
Hello, Dr. Bing. First of all, another great show. My comment, and I guess a question would be exactly what is it that makes him feel like she was safe? I don't understand this whole concept of safe when you're in a marriage or a relationship, and then someone outside of that union makes you feel safe.
Okay, let me give you my spin on it, and then I'm gonna ask Oscar to answer that specifically for you. When I hear that
Okay.
word, what I think about is this is somebody who is going to play by the rules. This is somebody who's going to be faithful. This is not somebody that I have to worry about where she goes, who she's with, what she's doing. She is not someone who's going to break my heart. She kind of fits into the mold of what my idea of a wife should be. That's safe, in my view. Oscar, what do you say?
Yeah, I agree. I think because we spend so much time always trying to chase what we really can't have, and once you have it, you realize that you can get it anytime. But when it's time to settle down, those sometimes those fast cars are also looked at by a lot of other men. So sometimes you look at getting with someone who's a little bit more like, she's pretty, but she's not necessarily like, you know, that Ferrari, but she's reliable. She's someone who I can build a family with. I can see her raising my children. Things like that is what you tend to see when a man sometimes really tends to settle down, and it's not every time. So I don't want to give that impression that every man is settling. That's not the case. But in some instances, that is what happens when the guy's ready to settle down. They want the lady who's going to probably not give him the most challenges when it comes to being looked at by other men. But that's also ends up being an insecurity of the man. It's
Yes,
not her. It's not her. It's definitely the
Right.
man's insecurities. And I experienced it. I've seen it, but at this age now and just in my life track, I know how to handle an attractive woman, and I know how to understand that because other men look at her does not mean anything as far as what she's going to do, right? And that's where the relation has to be tied in. So yeah, safe is definitely just a
absolutely.
word, and that's kind of what it means on the safe side from my perspective, from my
No, I
lens.
agree absolutely, and it's not going to trigger your insecurities because, like you said, most I'm not gonna say all men, but let's say a lot of men, all things being equal, would love to have a Ferrari parked in their garage. If
Yeah.
if the Ferrari is not going to cost me any more than the minivan, sure, I'll
Mhm.
drive a Ferrari. But
Yeah.
when they get the Ferrari, then they're concerned about every little thing. Who's denting it? Who's
Yeah.
touching it? Is the weather
Yeah.
damaging it? Is somebody going to steal it? And that's the insecurity piece that kicks in. So to
Yeah.
not have to worry about that, he goes for the minivan because most people aren't out to steal a minivan. Most people,
Right.
not if it's parked near a Ferrari. So it's that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
does that help? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, a little bit. I guess I'm old school in this respect because there's a book that's out. It's called Chosen Vessel, and it's about ridding yourself of something or someone before you bring someone else in. And so I was driving and I heard him say safe, and I did not understand what it meant uh, to connect with someone who made you feel safe. And so I just
Yeah.
really wanted to understand, just
Yeah. And
just what
remember,
that meant.
remember this, he also said earlier on when he was describing her as safe was that she was someone he could feel comfortable around and be himself around. So saying someone is
Yeah.
safe is not necessarily a bad thing. It doesn't mean
Mhm.
that
Yeah.
you're not attractive, that you're homely, it's not that kind of
Oh yeah.
thing. It's
Yeah.
like, yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's who is this person that I can be myself, because he talked about wearing the mask. He felt
That's
as
right.
if he could take, and I'm sorry, you're right here, I'm speaking for you, but he felt as if he could take the mask off around Hannah and there would be no consequences or repercussions. He could be his,
Yeah.
I
his self.
understand that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I want to
Yeah.
make sure that we all hear that part. But yeah, safe,
That's
it
good.
it depends on how you internalize that word, but just know
Yeah.
that in general, okay, we're generalizing. Just because a man is interested in, fast cars, and we're using the car analogy to the women, doesn't necessarily mean that when he's ready to settle down, marry someone, perhaps have children, take this person as their spouse, this person's about to take my name. Is this somebody that I
Yeah.
feel comfortable carrying my name, or am I going to be embarrassed by how she dresses, how she talks, where she goes? So yeah, she might be fun for a
Right.
good time, but she's not safe.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you. Where are you
Yeah.
Right.
calling from?
From Pittsburgh.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Okay.
Pittsburgh in the
From
house. I
Pittsburgh.
appreciate it.
That's right.
Yes,
All right.
indeed.
We've got
Thank you. Good conversation.
Thank you very
Thank you
much.
so much.
We have a couple of callers. We got a caller and a text message, but I know we're beyond break time. So I'm going to ask you, please just hold on. Give us a minute to go to commercial, and I'll take you as soon as we come back. You are listening to Dr. Linda Bing and Oscar Frazier, and this is Relationship Conversations on Pittsburgh's DSEN. We'll be right back.
Than Soul Pit Media with our award-winning print, internet, podcast, and Soul Pit television options. We can help your business get to that next level. For more information, contact Craig Dawson at 412-407-7685. That's 412-407-7685. And let Soul Pit Media take you to that next level.
Business owners thinking about back-to-school promotions and replacing summer flavors with pumpkin? What about your taxes? Reduce your stress and tax liabilities by planning for tax time now with Cameron Professional Services Group. CPSG takes your goals, values, and visions to create a custom tax plan catered specifically to your business. We work closely with you to ensure that as your business grows and goals shift, so will your custom plan. Located in the Hill District in Pittsburgh, PA, CPSG is a CPA and consultant firm, providing services in accounting, auditing, tax planning and preparation, community development, and operational management. Call Cameron Professional Services Group today at 412-251-0607.
Have you had the Beat by Niche experience? Beat by Niche is one of the top makeup artists in the city of Pittsburgh. She's touched the face of Cardi B, love and hip-hop personalities, and various Steeler wives. If you have not sat in her chair, what are you waiting for? Visit beatbyniche.com to schedule your special makeover for all occasions: weddings, graduations, proms, photo ops, and more. Visit beatbyniche.com and experience the touch of excellence.
All right, welcome back. Welcome back to Relationship Conversations with Dr. Linda Bing on Pittsburgh's DSEN. We are having a great time tonight. We are talking about relationships from the perspective of Oscar Frazier and his new book, Dear Ex-Wife. I'm telling you, this book is phenomenal. It's written, it's based on truth, but it's written like a novel. I mean, Oscar makes you feel what he's feeling, and you see the scenes, and particularly if you've lived in any of the cities that he's talking about. A lot of it takes place in Atlanta. There's some in Charleston. There's some in Charlotte. There's some in the DMV. And as you're reading, you actually feel like you're there. So please be sure, in the YouTube chat, we have a direct link to Amazon where you can buy the book. And I do believe that when we break and go into and out of commercials, my producer puts the book cover on the screen as well as that link. Now, unfortunately, we lost one of the callers. Hopefully the caller will call back in. And then there's someone else who was trying to text and it wasn't coming through. But I do have one from, here's some messages. So we have a message from Jada that says, I told my husband I'm the Ferrari and the minivan. Okay. Good move, Jada. That's a keeper. Okay. That's the keeper. You need to know how to be.
Actually, whoever wrote that is exactly how we should be thinking.
Yep.
Because if we start out as a Ferrari, we can't then say we're going to now become a minivan. It's like you got to have both. And the guys too. We're not talking about just the women at all. Us men, we get a little too comfortable too. We start getting that gut out there and everything else, and then it's like, but you still expect this woman to want you, and the same thing. And those things all play into it, and you'll see and hear more about that in the book as well, 100%.
Absolutely. And you have to know how to flex. As a woman, you need to be able to know how to go back and forth. And like you said, the
Come on
guys too.
now.
I remember, what before I would get married, I remember saying the same things it took to get me is going to take to keep me. So don't switch up. Don't think that just because I'm now yours, you can switch up. Got to keep it
That's right.
going. Okay,
That's
so
right.
did that call come through, Hezriel? Do you have a call on the line for me? Hello, caller, are you there?
I am.
Okay, hello, how are you?
Wonderful. This is really a great program. Thank you so much, Dr. Bing. And wonderful to hear from you as well, Mr. Frazier. So I had an experience similar to what Mr. Frazier was talking about, sort of a gentleman that was cheating on me. And then years later, after we had broken up, he came back and tried to explain, oh, listen, you need to understand that this is the way men have always done it in my family and people I saw in my hood. They always had one main girl and a side girl, which was no explanation for me. It was way too late. So now I'm asking you, I'm a boy mom, right? So
Yeah.
I tell my boys I'm a woman first, beyond everything else.
Yeah.
So I try to encourage them to have the self-esteem and all those things to feel good enough about themselves now so that they're not later on trying to fulfill a void of being accepted and some of the things Mr. Oscar was saying. So my question is, and I don't even know if this is even fair, looking back at your younger self and even your young adult self, is there something that potentially maybe your mom or maybe not your dad or some way to make you feel fulfilled or something that someone could have said to you? Because I'm consistently trying to pour into my boys that they don't have to be that way, but they're challenged with that. Oh, don't go to college being green. Make sure you have experience with people. Those types
Yeah.
of things that are thrown at them. So I'm just curious
Yeah.
if you think anything would have sort of changed your trajectory of how you ended up in relationships and multiple in cheating.
Good question. Good question.
Yeah.
Oscar, that's all you.
That's actually that's actually a very good question. The short answer is this. Now of course, if you can't tell,